conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, we see Andy Barr leaning more heavily into the unpopular positions with the Republican base. An interesting move when it comes to the fact that he's eyeing up Mitch McConnell's Senate seat, of course. We'll also go over what he thinks his strategy is here. The Kentucky Lantern writes an opinion piece that decides what a normal Republican is, and surprise, surprise, it has nothing to do with the Republican Party platform or what the majority of Republican voters would call a normal Republican. And finally, JCPS principals mouth off over start times, and one board member tells them to quit if they don't like it. We'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Of course, as always, if you want to reach out to the show, feel free to email info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. You can also head on over to theandrewshow.com in order to check out old episodes, as well as you can hit the contact tab there and reach out to the show as well. But before we dig into all those stories, an interesting mailer went out against Felicia Rabourn. Felicia Rabourn is an incumbent in the northern central Kentucky area, and she's being challenged from, I guess you'd call it the left, because obviously Felicia Rabourn is pretty farther on the right. Of course, she is somebody that I would definitely say is the more conservative Liberty Republican type if you're throwing titles on people, and she's being challenged by an individual that has a fair amount of backing, not a lot, but a fair amount of backing from a more left challenger, definitely a more left challenger. And an interesting mailer went out this week in that House District 47 race, and it had a picture of Felicia Rabourn and a dog, and it says, "What kind of person votes to shoot Old Yeller?" And of course, you know, this is an interesting attack ploy. Obviously, with what we see going on with Kristi Noem and her recent implosion on the national level with her political career, deciding to, of course, write books about how she shot Cricket the dog because it was an unruly animal in a gravel pit, and then came up out of that gravel pit and shot a goat. So obviously, I think that probably inspired this decision to run this mailer about who votes to shoot Old Yeller. But I do want to go over what the truth is here, because this is a great example. And I've talked about this before on the show of where the establishment will put forward these bills, these pieces of legislation that are just absolutely awful. That is not maybe not even absolutely awful, but has some nuance to it or some things to talk about. It's just not a very good bill. But if you vote against it, it will create these attack lines. Attack lines like, "Oh, you just hate dogs, you want to kill Old Yeller." Exactly what we're seeing when it comes here to Felicia Rabourn. Because what bill they are referencing, most likely, is where she voted no on House Bill 24, House Bill 24, I do believe. Nope, it's 258. So she voted no on House Bill 258. It was Bill Request 24. But she voted no on House Bill 258. And I brought this bill up at the time because while it was a bill that you would generally agree with, and it elevated what serious physical injury or infirmary to a dog or cat is, it redefines torture in a dog and cat and elevates those crimes of torturing a dog or a cat, which is, generally something we'd all agree with. Nobody wants somebody to torture a dog or torture a cat or just, cricket a dog just because it looked at him funny. Generally speaking, there should be some limitations there. And so on the surface, we'd agree with that, unless you absolutely just hate dogs. Now, the bill also covered cats. And so, if you're like me, you hate cats. So I'm just kidding. I don't hate cats that much. But point is that this bill on its surface looks okay, but when you dig down into it and you consider where laws are at the time, and this was something, as I said, when I originally discussed this bill and it was proposed, this elevated the torture slash physical injury slash abuse of a dog or cat to a Class D felony. And the problem with that is there's certain situations where we are punishing people who abuse children at less than a Class D felony. Or actually, we even have a Class D felony, the mistreatment of dogs, the abuse of a dog, is the same charge now as some types of pedophilia. Possession of child pornography falls into the same class level as punishment as torturing a dog or cat would be under this bill. Now, as I said before, I'm not here advocating that we should be torturing dogs or cats, but what I'm saying is, and I said this at the time, is that our value system has to fall in line. And are we really as a society going to say there's any situation at all where an animal has more value than humans? And when you look at your laws, you generally would like to shape them based upon what makes the most sense, what falls in line with our value system. And with that, you look at what's going on with the elevating the crime of punishing a dog or a cat to such high levels, and you take a look and you say, whoa. Are we really going to, as a society, say that they're worth more than a person? Of course not. And that's a good reason to vote against the bill. The other reasons I brought up at the time dealt with some provisions when it dealt with what's a domesticated versus livestock animal. If an animal has to be posing a threat to livestock for you to deal with it. So, the question would become if a cat, for an example, if you've chickens, you have good worry to maybe be worried about feral stray cats killing your chickens, of course. That's a reasonable concern. That's, the same way you worry about any kind of vermin from doing that kind of thing. And so if you see a cat on your property, though, because it would fall under this category now of law, unlike a coyote, for an example, unlike foxes have seasons, of course, but you can always kind of deal with them as vermin side of things. But unlike coyotes, which are viewed as a vermin that kills livestock, you can kill those any time of the year. But now a cat, I guess it would have to be posing a threat there at the time. So pretty much you'd have to catch the cat in the act of breaking into your chicken coop before you could deal with it. Because, I know we think of animals as cute, cuddly little things you keep around the house, but if they're not cute, cuddly little things you keep around the house and they're kept outside, they turn into wild animals. That's what they are. And so there was some questions I had when it came to the legislation on that side of things. Is this a bad bill? Is it a good bill? It's definitely not the biggest threat we ever had during this last session. Certainly not. But it does point to what I talk about all the time, which is that when we have legislation coming to the floor, what comes to the floor to vote on matters. And sometimes it's the setup, and sometimes it's bad legislation, and people can be attacked for it that actually voted the right way or a very defensible way, but it just becomes campaign fodder because they expect people like you, people like me to not be paying attention. Speaking of not paying attention, coming up after this, we'll be digging into Andy Barr. Make some interesting moves for an individual that is eyeing up that Senate seat, McConnell's old seat. We'll have that after this short break. You'll listen to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. And you are back on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So recently we saw this week the failure of the ouster of Speaker Johnson. Marjorie Taylor Greene had brought forward a motion to vacate, and the vote to table that motion overwhelmingly succeeded, with a lot of Democrats and Republicans coming together to table the motion to vacate Speaker Johnson's position. Now, regardless if you think that is a good idea or not, tactfully, okay, so there's a lot of good arguments that people have that vacating that speaker role tactfully maybe isn't the smartest thing to do right now. I'm not saying I agree with those arguments or disagree, but I do understand the concept of who else could win the speakership. Do you have somebody to upgrade him with? Is there an individual that can get the job done better? Are we kind of stuck here until we can get through November and add more seats and change up kind of what the makeup is? Or, what's the options here? There's arguments there, but you also have arguments, of course, on the other side that tactfully this would be the time to do it, because obviously if you go into the end of November, when you have the Senate and you have somebody in place that has shown such a willingness to kind of deal with some things we'll go into here in a second. But if you're going to change somebody out, if you look at Johnson, you say he's not a good conservative leader, we want to make a change, this maybe would be the good time to do it. So you can disagree that's tactful. You could say that Speaker Johnson is in the position he's in and there's nothing we can do about it. But I think we should all, who are conservative Republicans, not just Republicans, but conservative Republicans, agree that there are many reasons why, in a perfect world, you would like to remove Johnson if he was doing the things he's been doing. The funding of foreign conflicts without dealing with our border first, staying strong to that line, saying, I'm never going to let him, we need to worry about our problems here at home before we send money overseas, as Rand Paul calls it, the America Last Caucus, right? Because it's pretty clear and straightforward. People are not happy with. They're not happy that we're borrowing money from China in order to send money overseas while we have a border that's falling apart. And the other things he's done, like giving Democrats the high budgets they want. And objectively speaking, we know, and this is the number one reason why you should know that Speaker Johnson isn't doing maybe the best job that a Republican could, because the Democrats voted to table it as well. They voted right along with them. If the Democrats had voted to vacate Johnson, if they said, we don't like him either for completely different reasons, because, we're Democrats and he's a Republican, so we just don't like him because he doesn't do what we want him to, right? Because we're liberal. Well, they wouldn't have voted to table as well, but they overwhelmingly did. So that's evidence right there that what he's doing falls more in line with the Democrat agenda, or at least partially in line with the Democrat agenda, than it does the Republican agenda, because the Democrats want to keep him along. So whether you agree or disagree tactfully on if it's a good move to get rid of him, I think we can all see, if you're a conservative Republican, why there should be a desire to possibly get rid of him. But so keep that in mind, okay? Because you may be asking, Andrew, what does this have to do with Kentucky politics? I thought I was tuning into a Kentucky politics show. I've been hearing from Levin or Shapiro or Walsh or whoever you listen to on the national level, Gorka, talking about this motion to vacate. We get it. The Johnson's got his issues. We understand that. Well, what it has to do here is that this week, when Andy Barr was dealing with this vote on the motion to vacate Johnson, Andy Barr tweeted out a picture with him and Johnson saying #I'm with Mike, meaning, Mike Johnson. Now, this is a fascinating discussion for Kentucky politics, mainly because we know that Andy Barr will be making a run for Senator McConnell's Senate seat, which leaves the question, how are you going to sell us to vote for you? Because we are going to have a busy primary. For those of you who paid at all any attention during the 2023 governor primary, it's going to be that all over again for the Senate seat, for this Senate seat for McConnell. Because one, it's obviously a lot longer position, and two, now this intrigues the congressional delegation may be interested. Other members may be. It may be only Andy Barr. You may end up with somebody else. You could see, I don't know, maybe Brett Guthrie decides he wants to take a run for it. Who knows? But it's going to be that all over again. And when you look at that governor primary from 2023, you need to see exactly how Cameron won. And Cameron won that seat because the Trump-esque, Liberty-esque Republicans had no other obvious candidate to vote for once Savannah Maddox dropped out. Because, obviously, Cameron got that Trump endorsement early on. That obviously gave him a bigger lead, and it definitely pulled in more of the quote-unquote Trump Republicans to vote for him. But it still left a lane for other people. But what really closed the lane down for people like Ryan Quarles and Kelly Craft was that when Savannah Maddox dropped out, well, now that Liberty vote, that more conservative Republican vote, had no obvious candidate to land on. And there are voters out there that just because Trump endorsed somebody isn't necessarily going to vote for them. They may align with Trump, but they're not necessarily going to vote along with him. That is how Cameron ended up getting that nomination. He was able to pick up that gap. So now let's fast forward to 2026. And you have maybe even less, 20 to 30% of the vote that is establishment, that is willing to vote establishment, that is willing to vote McConnell because they'll just be so fed up with everything by that point. And so, you could easily see a Quarles, a Kelly Craft again. You could see other people coming in, and they're going to suck up that 30%-ish, as I was talking about, of the vote that maybe might be in play for somebody like Andy Barr, because at this point, it's possible Andy Barr convinces Trump to go ahead and endorse him, but I don't think it's necessarily likely. And then you end up too, when you look at the Liberty vote and the conservative vote, they're paying attention. They're seeing that Andy Barr voted to send money to Ukraine. They're seeing that Andy Barr voted to keep Mike Johnson. A lot of them still recognize that Andy Barr voted to certify the election for Joe Biden in 2020. And whether you like that or don't like that, a lot of the heavy Trump people see that and they take issue with it. And so this isn't going to be just like another run for re-election, like he's running for the 6th congressional district again. And so I thought we were actually going to see Andy Barr turn it around after he endorsed Trump, I don't want to say necessarily super early on, but after he endorsed Trump, I expected to see a guy do a little bit of an about face for the next 2 years, try to make a splash, vote in a way that the vast majority of the base favor with, so you can eke out, because you can already grab these establishment groups. You can already grab all these people. You can already grab the donor class. Now take some moves in order to bring in that base, in order to bring in that conservative base. But instead of doing that, he's almost doing the exact opposite. He's being the loudest he's ever been about standing against what the majority of the Republican base feels. And it doesn't make necessarily a lot of sense. Unless Andy Barr thinks it'll be easy for him because, of course, running for re-election for Congress is easy. But the reason why he wins that is because you have the incumbent effect that comes with that. You have the staff, the funding, the donors, the party gets behind you. I mean, shoot, the Fayette County Republican Party renamed their summer picnic to the Carol Ann Barr picnic after Andy's late wife. I mean, that has some value to it. That shows you have that backing of the party, or at least the perception is you have backing of the party, plus all the speaking, the media attention. Any radio show you want to go on, you can get on. And, well, not any radio show, but a lot of these local radio shows, a lot of the local media, Fox News, you can get on there, and a person who's challenging you can't. But moving from an incumbent now to an open seat, well, now you're dealing with people who have money too, because when you're running as a incumbent, in order for somebody to actually challenge you, you have to have someone come along and have enough money that people know they're running. I'm not going to say that you can necessarily buy every single seat, and I wish a whole lot more people paid a whole lot more attention, and those of you who listen to the show all the time know exactly what I mean by that. I talk about that all the time. But you still need people to know that you're running. And that takes money. So he's safe there. But when you're running now in that open seat, there's a lot more attention being paid. And there's a lot of other people who also have money to say that they are running. So we have to wonder, what will be the argument? What will be Andy Barr's argument to say, this is why you should continue to vote for me? This is why you should go ahead and vote for me for this McConnell Senate seat. What kind of possible argument could he make that would be convincing to anyone. Well, we know what he might try to make the argument on, and we can base that upon what we're hearing off of Michael Adams, Secretary of State's current Lincoln Day dinner speech, as he, I think, is prepping for a run for governor. And he, at his speeches, has been making an argument preemptively of why you should be voting for people like Michael Adams, why you should voting for people like Andy Barr. And we're going to go over what his reasoning is, what he thinks is going to convince people to come over to his side and support him for governor. But also we'll see a very similar argument coming out of Andy Barr running for that Senate McConnell seat. We'll have all that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. If you want to reach out to the show, as always, remember you can email info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. We'll be back in a few short minutes. And you're back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. So before the break, we're going over how Andy Barr, in his behaviors, has gotten, if anything, more uniparty, less conservative, which is odd behaviors for an individual that is clearly eyeing up that Senate seat at the federal level. So we ask ourselves, what argument is he going to make? What is he going to try to run on? Well, we get a little preview of what that argument might be when we take a look at Michael Adams, Secretary of State's, what his Lincoln Day dinner speech is. For those of you who are unaware, these Lincoln Day dinners, there's every single county party has one every single year, and at every single one of them, for the most part, every constitutional officer that is an elected Republican, so right now that's everybody but the governor and the lieutenant governor, show up and they make a speech. And because it's the same dinner and they've got a new one about every weekend or so, they just pretty much give the same exact speech at each and every single one. And Michael Adams, Secretary of State's speech, has been very telling. And to remind you, Michael Adams is right now thinks he's hot stuff. Why? Because he got the highest percentage of the votes of any person running in the November election, because he attracted in a whole lot of Democrat votes. And so he believes that he is now an expert to talk about what it will take for Republicans to win more elections in Kentucky. Never mind the fact that his faction, his types of beliefs, his thought processes that we're going to go over in a second, had kept Republicans out of the majority in the House. And it wasn't until Donald Trump came along, somebody that Michael Adams has a lot of hate for, somebody that Michael Adams says the party needs to get away from if they want to win. Never mind the fact that he's the one who delivered the majority in our Kentucky State House. But Michael Adams says, and the reason why he's talking this way himself is because he himself is planning on a run for the governorship, I do believe, based on his behavior, based on the way he's asking. I think he's going for that. Some people have speculated that he may be looking at that McConnell seat himself. That's very possible. It's a possibility that he could be looking to do that. Michael Adams was Mitch McConnell's attorney, and the question becomes: is Andy Barr more McConnell's guy, or is Michael Adams more McConnell guy? But I think Michael Adams believes he's got a better shot of winning that governor's election, and the argument he's making is that we have it all wrong. That people like me, people like most likely you, who believe in conservative values and messaging on conservative values, we have it wrong. And, he stands up there and he'll say that things like abortion, things like the LGBTQ craziness that's going on, things like standing for conservative fiscal responsibility, those kinds of conservative things is why we're losing, because we're too extreme. We're scaring people away. And he points at Cameron's loss to Beshear, saying that, Cameron was too extreme. That's why he lost to Beshear. And remember, when I said that the establishment would never take an obvious loss of one of their guys and learn from it, they are still looking at Cameron and saying, oh, he wasn't one of our people. One of our people didn't lose, despite the fact that Cameron was absolutely one of their people. Not only did he come from Mitch McConnell's office, but he had Scott Jennings, a CNN contributor and former Bush administration member, and Terry Carmack, McConnell's chief of staff, running his campaign. That's establishment as it gets. You can't get more establishment than that. But yet somehow they say that Cameron was the one. He was too radical. That's what Michael Adams is saying, and that I'm sure is going to be the same exact selling point Barr peddles out for the Senate. That if you want to win in the general against Democrats in Kentucky, for some reason, you need to vote for a Republican who is nothing but a Democrat, which is clearly false. One, if we wanted to vote for a Democrat, people would just vote for a Democrat. Maybe that's why people who say they're Republicans that run like Democrats don't do too well. And two, the exact reasons why people are changing their registration from Democrat to Republican in Kentucky has everything to do with those social issues that you say we're still just too extreme on. Do you really think that people are just switching their party because suddenly Republicans got a whole lot better at, selling their ideas? Of course not. Do you think people are switching to Republicans because they're like, yeah, I really like that say one thing, do another spending policy that you all have, that tax and spending policy. We like that. We think that's great. Do you think that's why they're switching? No, they're switching because the Democrats got extreme on social issues. And so they're switching to the Republicans, and that's what we should be running on. But instead, you have people like them saying, no. We shouldn't be doing that. And they're hoping you vote for them in a primary based upon that promise. So Kentucky Lantern put out an interesting opinion piece. Those of you some of you don't know who the Kentucky Lantern is. I believe they call themselves, somewhat middle of the field, but obviously not really. But the Kentucky Lantern had a opinion piece that was all about, called Some Legacy by Terry Carter. It was all about Damon Thayer's time in office. So Damon Thayer, Senate Majority Leader in the state Senate, and he is exiting the state Senate. He's done. And you may remember, and I covered on the show, that when Thayer was on KET talking with Renee Shaw, he mentioned that there are people out there that want to throw Republicans, that want to just throw gas on the flames and watch it burn and don't want to get things done. And by get things done, he means, of course, give the payouts to those corporate backers that are so important. And what Terry Carter, the author here, writing this opinion piece, is saying is that Damon Thayer is created this Frankenstein monster, that he's part of the problem. Now, for him to call it out is absolutely ridiculous. Quoting now from the article. In an April 21st KET interview, GOP Senate leader Damon Thayer was asked to define the term normal Republican. He said it was someone who wants to help put the fire out that's burning in America today. He said he's tired of the jokers, only adding last minutes that I don't think President Trump is the problem, but I do think his style of politics exasperated the situation and made it appear to be more ugly and dirty. And yeah, by the way, I'm voting for Donald Trump for president in November. Terry goes on to say in the article, this is the same Donald Trump currently sitting in a courtroom every day, the one who vows to use his next presidential term to exact punishment on perceived rivals, and, according to in his latest interview with Time magazine, uses crime as a cudgel, painting urban America as a savage hexscape, even though violent crime has declined in recent years, with homicides sinking 6% in 2022 and 13% in 2023, according to the FBI, which, by the way, that's kind of been debunked anyways. As he personally faces dozens of felony charges, including for election interference, conspiracy to defraud the United States, willful retention of national security secrets, falsifying business records to conceal hush money payments to a porn star prior to his 2016 election. And what political dystopia is Trump not one of the jokers to be tired of? And how did we get here? So, the Kentucky Lantern here is asserting that, one, that Thayer's right, that these not normal Republicans are the problem, but he's wrong to say that Donald Trump is somehow not a part of the problem. They think he is a part of the problem, even though everything they just described, they literally attacked Trump for saying he's going to use the law to go after his political rivals. And then they go on to list all the ways that Donald Trump is being gone after by the law, by his political rivals. And they see nothing wrong with it. Because, of course, though, they believe that Trump is a part of the problem. Of course it is. So Terry Carter goes on to say, how do we get here? As recently as a few years ago, there was a clear two-way split in the Republican Party of Kentucky. Normal Republicans claim the conservative Chamber of Commerce-style party of Ronald Reagan, while flipping over the table, Trump Republicans bucked all tradition. The normal Republicans are those that have the Chamber of Commerce-style party. Chamber of Commerce-style party. Well, at least she said it out loud, but we'll go over exactly why that isn't the normal Republicans. That those who don't believe in those types of actions, in that corporate welfare that the Chamber of Commerce-style, quote-unquote, Republicans do, while they're the real ones. After this short break, you're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. And you're back in the final segment here of the Andrew Cooperrider Show on quite a wonderful Friday. And before I go into the next segment, for any of you listening, in case you haven't caught it, I am feeling a little under the weather today, so I thank you all for bearing with me today, as maybe I haven't been my as excited over-the-top self that I am every single day, but that didn't stop me from bringing you all the news. So before the break, we were digging into how the Kentucky Lantern and Terry Carter over there had wrote an opinion piece reflecting on Damon Thayer, but in it, a non-Republican, Terry Carter, had the belief that she could somehow tell us what a quote-unquote normal Republican is, even though she herself isn't a Republican and obviously has never read the Republican Party platform. How do we know this? Well, she called a normal Republican a Chamber of Commerce style Republican. That's what she called a normal Republican. Not only that's what she's reflecting back on as our regularly elected Republicans, the kind of Republicans that they were used to for decades upon decades upon decades. But when you look at the rank and file members, the people who actually make up most of the Republican Party as far as registration goes, and the Republican Party voters, they do not agree with the Chamber of Commerce style of Republicanism. And it isn't even exactly a style. The Chamber of Commerce style of legislating would apply across the board to both Democrats and Republicans. It's just a way of legislating in order to make sure you bring in the political donations from the donation class while you're in power. And we know that that's not the normal Republican, because all we need to do, and if Terry Carter had bothered to do any research before she decided to weigh in on what is a normal Republican and what isn't, she would have bothered to have read the Republican Party platform. And within the Republican Party platform, and I would argue to say that if you are calling yourself a Republican, you are saying you are standing by Republican principles, you are saying you're an elected Republican and a quote-unquote normal one, that should be based upon the waypoint. How do we define a normal Republican? The Republican Party platform. And the Republican Party platform says very clearly that the government, that we as Republicans should not believe in the government picking and choosing winners and losers. It says we are against corporate welfare. It says we believe in free markets. It says a whole lot of things that don't fall in line with the Chamber of Commerce Republicanism, because the Chamber of Commerce, quote unquote, Republicanism that Kentucky may be used to involves things like enforcing medical monopolies through certificate of need laws, which is government picking and choosing winners and losers. It involves giving $410 million to Ford to build a battery plant. That is government picking and choosing winners and losers. That is corporate welfare. It involves things like ensuring that our horse tracks have monopoly, not just on horse betting, that's one thing, but on actual gambling as a whole in the entire state, to the point where even made moves this last session to give them control over charitable gambling because they were worried that was taking away from too much. That doesn't fall in line with the Republican Party platform. So how could you possibly say that that would fall in line with what is a quote unquote normal Republican? What is the argument there? And Terry never spells that out in her article anywhere. And that's why people who are not Republicans, who aren't conservatives, should stay out of trying themselves to define what a normal Republican is. By normal Republican, what Terry means is a Republican that is a controlled opposition. Now, earlier this week on the show, I covered how JCPS, Jefferson County Public Schools, that's Louisville, apparently they now have 9 different school start times, and they were looking at 9. I'm just blown away they have 9. And they're looking at switching to a standard 3. Now, they were pretty spread apart start times. So one start time was 7:30, the other one 8:40, and then the third one was 9:40. So almost 10 a.m. And the principals of specifically the high schoolers are hopping mad. Why are they so mad? Well, they're mad because under the changes, it looks like that the school system is planning on putting the high schools in the first start time and then putting the elementary schools in the last start time, which doesn't make any sense. Honestly, of all the options, it makes the least amount of sense. Just the logistics of it. So if you are worried about bus allocation, okay, so the least amount of students that will need bus will obviously be in high school because high schoolers can drive themselves. So the most students you'll have bus will be middle school and elementary school. Elementary school probably being the most because those are the parents, the kids who probably don't necessarily have older siblings that can drive them to school. And so with that in mind, and with in mind that you have to have more parental involvement in getting kids on the bus in the first place, you would think that they would put the kids' elementary school as the earliest start time. But for some reason, they're putting the high school as the earliest start time. So you should do elementary, where you'll have most likely the most amount of bus kids going to the most amount of schools, because there's more elementary schools than middle schools. Then at the middle start time, you should have the high school, because that'll be the least amount of kids bused, giving you more opportunity for buses now to be shifted around for the middle school routes, maybe a little bit less, but will be pretty similar heaviness to that of the elementary schools. Instead of going to that obvious argument that doesn't make sense, instead the school principals did something that, well, they typically always do. They use their government-sponsored activism that we see schools engaging in, where they use the email list they get because they're the principal. They used the access they had and decided to, quote unquote, tell on the school board members to voice their concerns to the parents around these school start times. These principals made a grave error. What they did is they used that activism to attack in the school's board instead of using it to go after Republicans in Frankfort. See, if they were using that to go after Frankfort, it wouldn't be a problem. If they were using it to go after, mean old conservatives, wouldn't be a problem. But now they're using it to go after the liberals that are on the school board. And whoa, that's a step too far. And so it actually led to one of the school board members sending out a letter here. Dr. Kolb sent this out. I appreciate the passion you have for your students and for safeguarding the opportunities they have. The vast majority of you are capable, committed, and skilled leaders that JCPS is lucky to have. This only adds my frustration and disappointment in the message many of you have communicated to a large number of people regarding transportation in school start times. Among other things, aspects of these messages have been unintentionally or not misleading and are contributing to a damaging narrative about JCPS. As I'm sure you're aware, JCPS has half the number of bus drivers we had only 10 years ago. This is a reality that the board and Dr. Polio are powerless to change in the near term. In fact, school staffing challenges will almost certainly intensify in the coming years. Among other things, this means we must eliminate transportation in many schools, we must have 3 start times, and schools must be fairly evenly spread out among the start times. I can't imagine any school wants to forego transportation, and it seems clear that virtually no school wants to start later than 9 a.m. Thus, decisions that the board must make will necessarily be unpopular with many people. There is no way around this, and pretending like there is some other magical path the board could choose, as many of you have done, is simply absurd, destructive, and not in good faith. Faced with staffing challenges, the board has 3 choices. 1, we eliminate transportation in many more schools. 2, we start many schools at 6:30 a.m. or even earlier. Or 3, many schools start at 9:30 a.m. or later. Please feel absolutely free to tell the board and Dr. Polio if you'd like to eliminate all transportation to your school and the other schools you would choose, or if you would like your school to start at 6:30 a.m. or earlier, and other schools that should as well. Let's be clear. There's no option 3 presented last night. Whoever started or contributed to this misinterpretation significantly damaged the board's ability to stay focused on the most salient factors as we deliberate an extremely difficult issue. In reality, there are always a huge number of options the board can choose from. Last night, the board could have voted to start many schools at 4 a.m., and it would have been Dr. Polio's job to figure out how to make it work. And so he goes on like this to basically chastise JCPS staff for being a bunch of whiny complainers and not getting on board. And to him I say, you made your bed, now you lay in it. You made your bed. This is the work environment you have created. And this is why you have a staffing problem. This is why people are leaving there. This is why school bus drivers don't want to work there, because you have created this environment. Now you have to deal with it. Well, y'all, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank you all so much for joining me. We'll see you back here Monday. I hope you have a great weekend.